So thank you so much for coming. We've got a bunch of our volunteers from different committees. We have Eric Alessi from Essent here with our board representation, Ajay Kaul. How do you pronounce your last name, Ajay?
Just like CALL, call.
Kaul. Okay. Kaul
Yes.
from
Yeah.
Sanmar, and then Robert Cathro Oliver from commonsku, and Pablo Hankey from Order My Gear. So thank you so much for coming to help answer PromoStandards questions. We'll just go down the list of the questions we received beforehand. We have for the technical topics and API management, we've got a lot of requests for virtual walkthroughs of how to add companies if there isn't endpoints related to a company, how to update our endpoints, and connect with suppliers' endpoints. I don't know if one of you wanted to take the lead and share your screen and show how we can do some of those things.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my screen and try my best to walk through. There's a lot there to process, but I'll see
Yes.
if I can walk through. And if anybody has any questions, then this is something it's been a while since I've done this. So let me see how I can share my screen here. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So again, I'm assuming that whoever sent this question is a member and they have a login. So that's the first step, I believe. You have to have a login. And I'm gonna try to walk through all the, I think there were three of those different questions like endpoints and how to edit endpoints and how to contact the suppliers. I'll try to kind of walk through most of those, and if we have anything remaining, then we can answer those questions. So basically, when you log in, you get this homepage here. What we usually do is if you need access to the supplier endpoints, this you go to resource and you should have a kind of this menu options here. And so if you click on supplier endpoints, there will be it says if you're not redirecting. So I usually just end up clicking here, and essentially I have this page that pops up. So assuming you're a distributor that you're looking to, hey, I'm gonna work with, let's say hit promo, you can access their information here. And so when you are accessing their, so you have access to their WASDL. So this is the production WASDL, this is their test WASDL. It is up to the supplier to ensure that they have this information up to date. If WASDLs change, let's say, they should make sure that they have a way to update and access this setup, so they can update their WASDLs. If you want to view and look at that here, you have the production module for this is the invoice 1.0. So you have the production module and then you have the test module. So this will give you all the information you need as a distributor to access that URL and the information. If you would like access to hit promos, I'm going to grab an example here, hit promotional products. So as you can see, hit promotional products, so you can see all their features that are live. So different versions here, depending on the specifications. Some of these, went like, for example, inventory 1.0 was the first version. Then we had 1.2.1, and then I believe 2.0 here. So HIT has chosen to keep all those services live. They have different features and functionality available depending on the spec version. So that's more on, as you are a distributor, you would want to engage with the supplier and get more information on specific features that you're looking to consume and adopt. So for example, if you would like to request credential, you're a new distributor, you want to work with it and access their environment. So you will hit this request credentials. Now you will see here, it says invoice 1.0. What we usually recommend, and I believe, and Jessica and Karim, I think we're planning to update our website at some point. And there
Yeah.
is some feedback around this process itself that we have shared. So hopefully this will look a little different on the when we plan to go live on the newer website. But what we are recommending here is to share your information, like what would you like access to? So I'm taking an example of Sanmar, for example. Sanmar has the same credentials that you can use to access any of our features on the API, right? So you can have invoicing, inventory, product data, pricing, purchase order. It's the same web, it's the same credential. So you could say like, hey, I would like to access, all these services and request credentials. So you can, so you don't have to necessarily, for example, hit each of these individuals separately and then access and request access to all of them separately. You can just choose to hit one of these and just submit your request here. So whoever is on the receiving end will look at your request and then they will reach out to you. Your information will automatically populate here. So they will have your email address. You can choose to enter your phone number so that if you want them to call you, you can have that. And then obviously the messaging around what specifically you are requesting access for. So that's kind of basically it, and then you can submit. So that's how you access credentials or request credentials for access from the supplier that you choose to work with. So that's the piece. So I think one of the questions around requesting credentials. That's how you access it. Now, if you are a supplier, I think one of the questions, how do we add endpoints, right? So how do you go and add these different endpoints here, right? WASDL
Yes,
and the
that is
relevant
one.
information. If you're like, hey, I'm a new supplier, we just added a new feature, inventory 2.0, and now I want to go back and update. So if you are a supplier, again, the assumption is you have a login, you have credentials, you have the right access. If those things are not there, I would probably, Jessica, you can help them make sure that they have the right access and to all the different
Yes.
tools. But the way to do it is, once you end up on this page, so you're assuming you will have access to this page. This is your personal kind of information profile. So you will hit company here, and then once you hit company, you will see this new endpoint. So if you are planning to add a new endpoint, this is where you go and you select whichever endpoint, depending on what option, and then you will get the drop down to whichever inventory, and then you say usually it depends. If I'm like the person who's planning to do it, I'll probably do it in production. So I want to have a production URL. So I'll wait until the production, but everybody else, suppliers can do it. And hey, it's in whatever the waiting for review, or usually it should be in production. That's the status of the service, but some may try to choose like a beta release. Like I think we're going through a couple of new features that are in beta release. So you could have like a review. And so you choose to do review status and then do the live URL. That means that that the specification, the new specification of the feature is not production ready, but is available in review for specific members to adopt or suppliers to adopt. So they can choose to do that and expose the production URL and the test URL. But usually 99% of the time it's production, and then it's basically your WASDL, right? Whatever is the front end exposed to the to the end users. So that's the WASDL you put, and then you hit save. So that will create essentially an endpoint here. So it will just get listed here. That's how it's going to happen. So for example, for Sanmar, we have all these endpoints listed here. So that's how you add a new endpoint. I think one of the also other question, how do we edit? So you can go here. This is the edit button. So then you can edit, and let's say I was saying like, hey, your WASDL has changed, right? The test has changed or whatever, right? So you can update those WASDLs here and then save. And then that way you can save an existing endpoint that is already added to this on this page. Other features, I think you can add new contact if you want to have a new contact here. So you can add a new contact here. You can edit some of this metadata here. You should be able to edit here. The contacts are probably at the bottom. So that information will be saved here as a new user. So you can see who is the admin. You can probably grant some permissions here. Who requests the endpoint auth, you can have that. So that type of information will get updated if you have a supplier who's planning to add. So all of this information, by the way, when you do this, what happens is when you go to the member directories, I think this was one of the questions, how do we access the contact information for any member, I would say, supplier, distributor, third-party service provider, decorator, whoever is part of the member directory. So first you need to make sure you're logged in, and then there's a member directory. Then you can choose to put a name, or anything else. So you can choose to do that, like here. So usually you will see business contact. It depends on how they're set up. You could see they have business contacts. They could be business contact, or like I think in Stanmore's case, we have some technical contacts here. So you could choose like one of the questions. Hey, if we have an endpoint and it's returning an error, and how do we contact the supplier? Right. This is where if there are technical contacts, great. Then you know who to reach out to. If there are business contact, I would encourage you to start with them, and they may be able to route you to the right team internally in your company, to the right contact. So that's how you would access the information to ensure that you have the right people to engage with when you're running into any challenges regarding the endpoint consumption or have any questions on the endpoint. Also, a lot of suppliers have onboarding guides. So if you have a relationship already with a supplier that you're working with or plan to work with and connect through PromoStandards, a lot of suppliers have onboarding guides. Again, our example, I know I work on the best practices committee. One of our goals is to encourage suppliers and distributors to have onboarding technical guides that allow newer distributors to engage with the supplier in a meaningful way. And a lot of that onboarding guide information is helpful because that is specific to that supplier, right? So PromoStandards in an organization will give you sort of a document repository, right? You want to engage with, on a specific feature, let's say, so you download the specification, but then when you're working with a supplier, their onboarding guide really helps you because you can get a really in-depth understanding of how they are using the specific feature, how you can access their URLs, how do you test against them, they will also have contact information right in there. So that's helpful as well. I know some of the suppliers I'm aware of have those onboard for consumption. I'm gonna stop there and see if there are any questions or if I missed anything, Jessica, from that top 3 or 4 questions that were asked.
Yeah, you think you covered it great. I just want to also mention, if you're reaching out to suppliers or distributors that are affiliated with PromoStandards, and if you're not getting a response, Ajay showed you how to look up some other people to respond to or to reach out to. But if you're still not getting a response for members, you can reach out to me, and then I can try to help connect you with someone from those particular membership companies. But again, that's only for members. I know there's members and non-members on the call, so that is one of the membership benefits. I'm not sure if it can be covered on this, but one of the questions was asked a couple different times of if we're able to give an explanation or a show how to implement or what to do with endpoints with all the code. I'm not technical, so I'm sorry. I know I'm butchering that question, but what exactly do we do with the data once you're given access to endpoints and credentials and things like that?
I can probably, I was trying to understand that question better because that is a really broad question. I would love
Yeah.
probably Robert's input in that as well. But from my perspective, the answer is really depends what you're trying to accomplish, right? So let's say you are a distributor. Again, I'm making some assumption here on that question. Let's say you're a distributor, you're trying to work with a supplier, and your goal is to, hey, we want to build a product catalog on our, for the supplier, and access the supplier endpoints to get the product data from their system. Then the goal would be first you have to engage with them. You have to have a conversation. You access the product, PromoStandards product data. We have two versions available there: product data 1.0, 2.0, right? Depending on, and they have slightly different features and functionalities available in each of those versions. So depending on which version you choose, the best way I can see, and that we encourage as a supplier to who are new distributors to really engage with us. Our support team is really knowledgeable on the PromoStandards platform, and obviously we are subject matter experts on our product data and our product ecosystem. So we can really walk the customer or the distributor in this case, walk them through how our product data looks like. How often do we update? How does the metadata change? How do we add new products, update new products? And then also sit down with the distributor and see what are their end goals? What are they trying to accomplish? Right? Are they putting up a new, let's say, custom web store for their program pricing? Is it a pop-up store that's gonna update, open and close quickly in 7 days? Like, what's their goal there? So it's really helpful to better understand their use case scenarios, so we can then walk them through as a supplier how to best engage with us, consume our data. So that's kind of my high level. I don't know who asked this question, but that's kind of what I can glean from that question.
Yeah, I'd say to add to that, in general, there's three major sets of standards. There are status document sets, which would be inventory availability, order status, order ship notice. There are data sets, things that Ajay was talking about, like product data, product pricing configuration, which is an infamous one, things like that. And then there's the transactional data sets. So the purchase orders, the invoicing, remittance device, et cetera. So what can you do is pretty much the whole life cycle of managing an order from cradle to grave. And so it comes down to, what do you want to do, which is exactly what Ajay is saying. So once you know that, you can have a member, you can have the community, or your trading partner that's familiar with PromoStandards give you guidance on the proper endpoints that you should be working with to consume that data if you're a distributor. And if you're a supplier that has distributors asking for that information, it's the same thing. You can ask a member, ask the community, or ask the trading partner, what are they looking for? And then that will give you your roadmap in terms of what you should implement in what order.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the next question is transition from SOAP to REST. Is PromoStandards planning a switch? I think
The short answer for that is yes. The standards committee is actively investigating first transitioning existing standards from SOAP to RESTful standards, and then secondly, only producing new standards using REST JSON payloads.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, creating and understanding endpoints, a beginner to intermediate guide. I'm reading this, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay's already covered this one, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
That's the
Okay.
short of it. We have workshops, and we've had workshops in the past, and we
Yeah.
have a number of videos that walk people how to go about
For each one.
consuming or even creating one in general.
Okay. Are there any implementation strategies or best practices for endpoint connections with distributors?
Yeah,
Is
I
this,
can.
is that a
Sorry, go.
supplier asking? I'm just curious.
I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go, Eric. So I'm gonna answer both, and I think we presented since just to reiterate what Jessica was sharing about. So I represent the best practices committee, and um, one of our goals is to share implementation strategies and recommendations on, for newer distributors and suppliers on how to go about navigating through PromoStandards, right? So to answer the question, we did touch upon this at Tech Summit as part of our presentation. So um, give me a minute. I'm going to walk through. I'm just trying to pull up some slides here that might help and walk you through just a high level implementation strategy. So give me 1 minute here. I'll pull up. Share my screen again. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at a high level, and this is, I'm not sure everybody on the call is familiar with our best practices site, and I can set the link here, but the easier way to access, the best way, if you are, obviously you have to be a member, but if you're a member, you can access our best practices site here, PromoStandards best practices. It links out to an Atlassian page here, and you should have access to all the artifacts on this website. And at a high level, just to specifically, I mean, I don't want to spend ton of time here because I just want to focus on the question that was asked, but you can spend time perusing through there's a lot of content that our best practices committee has put together individually on the specifications, how to consume these specifications, what's the best practice when you are planning to adopt a specific feature or service. And then there is a section for kind of like general implementation strategy. That if you're a new distributor and you're trying to navigate, like Eric mentioned, you have a transactional path, you have a non-transactional path, right? You have the simpler, feature sets, and then you got the more complex pricing and PO, all of that, right? Decorated, configured PO. So, how do you navigate through that best? So this is kind of the page. There are two main pages. There is the specific section for distributor integration strategy that walks you through some of the high level best practices. And then you have the supplier integration best practices. Some of them kind of interweave similar best practices of suppliers and distributors. Some of them are different. So I'm not going to go through this page. What I wanted to do was show a part of my deck that I presented at the Tech Summit. See, can you see my deck here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so what I wanted to just walk through some of this information here. Let me see if I can do the presentation here. All right, you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through the distributor best practices, and those are included with the implementation strategies, and then I have a couple of slides on the supplier best practices as well. So from a distributor standpoint, when you are planning to engage with the suppliers and adopt, let's say anything, right? Order status or OSN or inventory at a high level, depending on what you're planning to adopt. These are some of the high-level implementation strategies. So essentially, one of them is minimizing the real-time use of API. So let's say you're planning to connect with an inventory or order status or OSN or a PO. You want to restrict the real-time use of the APIs to these features. You can still use the others like product data and pricing, but real-time APIs in you are trying to process a PO in real time. What should you before the PO? Let's say, for example, you really need to understand what is the order processing workflow from a supplier standpoint. How do they process your orders when you submit an order, right? For example, in case of Sanmar, the question becomes, okay, how often can we pull order status? As soon as we submit the order, or do we have to wait? And in that case, we have a best practice, like we share that we would ideally like the distributor to wait for 2 hours before they pull the order status, because the order status has to go, because the order has to go through a number of different systems that eventually ends up in a reporting database. That's where we push and expose that order status. So it really depends on the individual supplier. Now, some suppliers may allow you to access the order status right away as part of the ordering workflow. So you have to ensure that you engage with the individual suppliers and better understand their order processing workflow. Also, plan to keep the order status calls to 2 to 3 times a day for individual PO. For example, again, I will take an example of Sanmar. We ship before cutoff time, we ship the products orders the same day, and it doesn't change the status that often. So we, from our perspective, we say, hey, call 2 to 3 times a day for a PO, and you will most likely get the most up-to-date status. Also, as part of a recommendation, we recommend that you nest the OSN call as part of your order status call. So you're making the order status call and you see status of partially shipped or complete. Then we want to make sure that you're making the OSN call so you can get all the relevant tracking data and metadata related to that shipment. Also related to inventory, if you're pulling inventory for the entire catalog once or twice a day, I want to recommend that you pull the inventory data at the product ID level to minimize the number of calls, because you could have product ID and you could have up to 200 or 300 part IDs related to that product. So we want to make sure that you're making the call at the product ID level, so you can get a heavier payload, but you will have all the inventory data related to that product. The other recommendation is caching the data wherever possible. For example, you don't need to make the product data calls daily to fetch the metadata from the supplier system. You can build a local database and a repository and a product management system, so you can pull all the data, including the images and pricing and config information. You can, again, depending on the supplier, for example, I'll take Sanmar's recommendation as well. We'll take once a month is more than enough to update your product data. To access and update the database on your end. Adding a delay per API request for any that are batched together. So this is essentially related to we recommend waiting for each API request to complete before starting a new one. Even adding a few milliseconds of delays between each request, especially if you have a concurrent request, you're trying to access our product catalog and you're making, let's say, 3,000 product ID level requests. You want to make sure you're giving a little bit of delay between each request, so it doesn't, so as to optimize both the supplier platform as well as the distributor platform. From a supplier standpoint, we want to make sure that you have paying close attention to the quality of the data that is passed in the APIs. There could be a strong temptation to pass what you have and call the API complete and just meet the sort of the optional field the mandatory field requirements. But we really encourage suppliers to work with the distributors, your high volume distributors, your partners, to better understand how useful it is for them to consume your product data, for example, and leverage that. How are they exposing that product data to their end users? And so depending on that, you may choose to fill the optional fields, non-required fields as well, so as to allow the distributors to have a real value add on their end. Also, making sure you have you have a built-in integration guide, like an onboarding guide I was referencing earlier, because that will really help. You can expose your contact information. You can expose specific nuances around your feature sets. Also, any maintenance window from a support standpoint when you expected downtime for maintenance, or could be any rate limits, right? If you have some sort of a throttle on your end to rate limit the inbound calls for optimization, you should be able to expose those to the end users so they can then optimize their endpoints as well accordingly. And then using a CDN that gives you image caching and rate limiting tools. This also helps to speed up the process of loading time and image delivery. So it's really helpful to allow the CDN to access the servers that are closest to the users. Definitely improves the efficiency. So definitely recommend that. And this is sort of the general rollout strategy. Eric was alluding to that earlier. So we recommend essentially two main paths. You have the transactional path and you have the non-transactional path, depending on your use case scenario and how you want to go about it. Most of the distributors start with sort of the simpler APIs in services and features, and then work towards kind of increased complexity on either the transaction side or the product data side. So you can, for example, on the transaction path, you can start with inventory and then order status and OSN. And then on the non-transaction path, you can start with media and product data. And then eventually you can start, you probably end up with needing the product pricing and config. And then eventually the purchase orders, if you're doing configured purchase orders, you definitely need the pricing and config for those configured orders. So you can graduate towards those once you understand kind of the PromoStandards schema, how to consume the data in that schema, and then work towards the more complex feature sets. Also, beta testing and soft release. We highly recommend any new features that you're implementing soft release those, especially to your select kind of high volume distributors. And do a pilot program with them, gather some feedback on the implementation before you launch those features and publish the endpoints on the PromoStandards website. Sizing the right technology, really helpful to understand how you want to build the infrastructure depending on the features that you are consuming. Some of the PromoStandards API calls are really verbose and heavier payload. So as a result, you want to make sure that your whatever infrastructure you're planning to choose, that you can you have the ability to adjust to that payload size. You know, some of the heavier ones could be like the product data, the product pricing config data, right? The OSN, the order status, depending on how far you allow the end users to consume that status data. That could be a heavier payload, so you want to make sure you have the right size technology and infrastructure in place. I touched a little bit on the rate limiting and then setting upfront expectation. Both of them kind of go together. Essentially, what we encourage is essentially having the documentation available and publish that documentation on your website for suppliers. A lot of that information around, you know, how often is the product data updated, your media or your invoices updated, how often is your order status updated. So all of that information is really helpful to be in a guide so that end users can consume that when they are planning to adopt any one of your services. And then the last one is audit logs. Really helpful to build these audit logs in your platform as part of your service offerings from a supplier standpoint. And as well as from a distributor standpoint. This really helps you understand how your service is running. For example, you could look at the one of the use case scenarios, or I would say the ROI on PromoStandards. You could have like, hey, if there is one successful OSN call and you get the data back, that essentially means that the end user doesn't have to pick up the phone and call their inside salesperson to say, hey, where the order is, right? Has it been shipped or not? So any one of those use case scenarios really add value, and you will provide you an insight of how your company is doing, how efficient it is, the services you're launching, right? And they also help you troubleshoot issues and better understand and analyze the customer behavior, the call patterns, and the trends, and then be able to engage with them in a more meaningful way if you have to have them tweak a specific call or redesign that call. It really helps to have those audit logs available so you can share that information. So I think that was what I wanted to talk about. I know I took a few minutes there, but I thought it would be helpful to walk this through again to kind of show the general best practices implementation strategies for both suppliers and distributors.
We had several questions with that, so I think you touched on a lot of the questions that were that we hadn't even mentioned yet. So it was very helpful. Thank you.
So related
go
to
ahead.
that, because I think it's always important, is that oftentimes we talk about the journey if you're implementing yourself, and a lot of people become members or looking to implement themselves. At the same time, we have a robust service provider membership that have been working with implementing the standards with suppliers, distributors, or both for over a decade, since, in the early days of PromoStandards. So even if you're looking to implement yourself, take a look at the service provider directory. You can just go to resources. Under the resources menu on the website, you can see a comprehensive list of them. You can find consultants if you're just looking for consulting, if you're looking for assistance with implementation, but also you can find service providers that have done that work already, and all the things that Ajay has talked about and all those best practices, and proving out the infrastructure is there for you. And it doesn't matter if you're a supplier or a distributor, there's going to be service providers that can assist with that.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great point.
Are we able to jump in and ask questions here live, or is there supposed to be a chat going on?
So we're going to go through all of the submitted questions first, and then if there's time at the end, we're going to open it up for more questions.
Okay. I didn't see where the submissions were, so.
Okay, so the next one, we have this question quite a bit, but I'm not sure if we have an answer for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Shopify API implementations and integration tips. Do we have anything we're able to give for that, or is this an example of, Eric, of when you have issues like this, you probably should find a service provider that can help?
Yeah, we don't publish anything specific in terms of a single end-to-end integration. And our best practices are all in general. So somebody that's looking to tie in with an e-commerce platform like Shopify or BigCommerce or any others, yeah, a service provider who's a consultant or has done those implementations would be a good start.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've worked with some, just to add to what Eric was saying, we've worked with some of the third-party implementers who have worked with Shopify. So if somebody's looking for any suggestions within the industry on who to reach out to, let's say if they have a Shopify platform store, web store, and they are looking to integrate with a certain supplier, I'm assuming that's the question there. I could be misinterpreting, but if I'm understanding that correctly, they're looking to see how they can connect their Shopify website to any of the supplier PromoStandards integration. I'm happy to share. They can reach out to me. I'm happy to share a couple of third-party implementers that I know of that have been working with Shopify and built like a package that directly engages and sits on top of Shopify platform.
Thank you. Okay, now next, we're going to strategic and evolutionary discussions. Eric Lessie, I think you're taking the lead on that. What we have there is what is the next evolution of PromoStandards, future roadmap and enhancements, and how PromoStandards is adapting to industry changes and needs.
Yeah. In general, I think to see where we're going, it's good to talk just a minute in terms of where we were. And we started this journey by creating the simplest and easiest way to implement. And those were the status transactions. And that's where we started. And it was fairly easy for suppliers to implement and for distributors to consume. And then we rolled it out from there, knowing that what we wanted to do was get to a level 1, and then we wanted to level set with a version 2 of everything. And so we're in the process of still level setting everything to version 2 to make sure that we have common terminology and common functionality along the endpoints. And with that, we're working on our future in terms of our evolution, going into version 3, which is what Robert was talking about earlier, which was getting us to be RESTful, to have a REST interface, to simplify what we're doing even further. And again, level set, making sure that all the standards across the board are all working in similar fashions, right, as expected. So sometimes that's as simple as terminology, but as we get that all set in version 2, in version 3, you're going to see that it's mostly about getting to a RESTful interface with JSON payloads, and with that, add incremental and ideally optional functionality. And so the standards committee works on balancing all of that. And we're also looking at extending out functionality as well. So we're looking for complete life cycle. And so remittance advice is a current example of that. So that's a 1.0 standard that was developed that's coming out. And the whole point there is you've got trading partners that are paying electronically and need to communicate what they're paying, what purchase orders. So distributors need to get that info to suppliers. That's all part of that transactional life cycle. So we continue to evaluate building out that transactional life cycle. At the more extreme end of it, and this is something that Robert can chime in at, is we know at the end of the day, we want to be able to make it as easy as possible and as functional as possible for a distributor to start at the very beginning with, well, what do you got and what is it going to cost me landed to get this configured the way I want it configured? And that gets into the next version of product price and configuration, PPC. I don't know, do you have a couple comments on that, Robert?
For product pricing and configuration,
yeah,
the current challenges with it seem to largely revolve around no defined algorithm to calculate pricing, given the data that the product pricing and config endpoint provides. So it's different across suppliers. And there's not much clarity on what fields mean what, and how various configurations can be combined or not combined, which combinations are allowed and which are not allowed, as well as which charges are mandatory and which ones are optional. And so those are all things that we plan to address in the upcoming version of the standard.
PPC is the most sophisticated schema that we have, and anybody that's worked with defining a configuration is not surprised at that. And anybody that uses PPC experiences that. And the goal of PPC 1.0 was to make it as easy as possible. That means not necessarily that it's the easiest thing you can do, but as easy as that knowledge domain allows to figure out how a product is configured. So we went to market with trying to communicate as effectively as possible. How do you get a one color imprint on something? Not that you can't do other colors and not that you can't do optional things, but what's included with this product as it's priced, and then what can you do? And we're still seeing that people are working through their adoption for that. At the same time, we're working towards the future, which is what Robert is talking about, which is, well, now it should be a little more a la carte. So a more, I wouldn't want to say flexible configuration, but that it becomes clear semantically what that configuration represents, and then it can be electronically processed. So meaning that the system that's presenting the configuration, so that'd be on the distributor side, knows to say, okay, I've got this tumbler, and this tumbler is in this color, and it comes with a straw, and it comes with the lid, but I can optionally change the straw color, or change what that straw is, or change the lid color, if that's an option that's available. So it can have a default configuration at rest, which is it's a blue tumbler with a blue lid, with a blue straw, with a one color imprint. And then you can know what that is. But then you can also know, based on the configuration, what other things you can do with that base product and how you can adjust that configuration to get the exact configuration that the end customer is looking for. And that's what Robert and his team are working on. And so that's a big part of our future.
Okay, awesome. Then another question that's asked a lot is, who do you reach out to when you're stuck? If it's a specific supplier, you reach out to them, or a distributor, or service provider. However, if you're really stuck and you're a member, you can also reach out to me and I can help you. That is a member benefit. All right, so now I think we are done with all of the submitted questions. So if there's anyone on the call that has a question we did not go over, now is your time.
Yeah, I had a question, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the right forum or group of people to answer this, but so we're a smaller supplier. We spent a better part of last year standardizing our data, formatting it so that we could develop PromoStandards compliant endpoints, et cetera. We've got some of those published. And really, I'm just trying to look at this from a sales perspective. And I don't know if anyone here has any perspective on this, or anyone that if they do, they can share it. So we're listed on there. We have our PromoStandards endpoints listed on the site there. But there's lots of suppliers on there, hundreds of them, obviously. So what I was hoping to pick up, or maybe get some guidance on, or maybe some experience on, is we don't want to sit around and just wait for people to come and just say, find us. Oh my gosh, you're on there. Hey, let's try to interface. We want to go and pitch this and sell this and say, hey, listen, we're providing these data endpoints. This is the value of it, et cetera. So that was really where I was looking to get some insight or some guidance, or maybe some case studies that people have done. That seems to me that, given some of the technical requirements on really both sides, specifically for the distributor, we're going to need to be targeting a distributor that's got more technical resources really than, a 2 or 3 person operation. Obviously distributors run the gamut. You've got 100 multi-million-dollar operations. You've got 1 or 2 person operations, and then all sorts of different sizes in between. What are the distributors that you're seeing that are utilizing this, I would say, to the greatest extent? What's the target there? How do we reach them? And then, are they, there's lots of suppliers here that are offering their data, right? So they've got to be selective on who they choose, because they can still pull almost all that information through the normal trade platforms, ASI, SAFe, et cetera. So, the information I picked up here is valuable, but I'm just wondering, has anybody spoken with any suppliers that have, been actively pursuing other distributors? Any case studies that have gone along with that? Really, what we should be doing, who should we be targeting, or because I'm not going to call Joe a sales guy at distributor ABC. We're going to probably have to reach someone in their tech department, et cetera, who has some experience with this. So just looking to see if there's any guidance on how that's gone, or what's been successful, what hasn't.
I think if you want to reach the largest number of distributors, your best bet would be to go through a service provider, or get in touch with the service providers for that integration, because they have technical expertise with integrating that, and they all have, I don't know,
Yeah.
different benefits.
I wouldn't assume just because they're a small distributor that you can't integrate with them, because there are a large number of small distributors that are using service providers for their system, and those systems are integrated. So traditionally, there's like with anything with adoption of any kind, there's that catch-22, right? That chicken and egg, what comes first? Do you build it and they come, or does somebody demand it and then you build it for them? And so you'll always see that there's a place for both of those things. When we started PromoStandards, we knew that we needed to get a core set of progressive and larger suppliers to implement, because not only would that set the standard, the de facto standard for the industry, and not only did they have the resources to do it and the need to do it, but then they would have the greatest opportunity or chance of having their distributor customers that would want it. And on the same time, it is true for the distributors. The early distributors were implementing the technologies themselves, and they were creating demand. So it was one of those things that years ago you needed a fax machine because somebody wanted to fax it to you. So you made an investment and you did the fax machine. This is the modern day equivalent of that for a very tight integration. And so it behooves the supplier to integrate so that they can meet the needs of their distributor customers. And those customers are getting more sophisticated, and they're also getting smaller in the sense of the market opportunity, because there's so many service providers that are serving their needs, and they've got PromoStandards integration. So as a supplier, for a strategy for you, it's twofold. One is have the technologies for those that want it. Talk to those customers, starting with your customers that you see are the larger customers, and larger by volume, not by size. You could have a $2 million distributor and they're giving you $500,000 of business, you're going to pay attention to them. And so it's looking at that and seeing an opportunity, and the opportunity is twofold. One is the distributor may be doing something and not even know that you're doing it. They're not going to discover you necessarily looking at the directory, the PromoStandards directory of endpoints. So you do outreach. You have your sales team, or you would have an evangelist within your sales and marketing team that their job would be to talk to those distributors to see what they're doing. And you're going to identify your customers that you're doing the most transactions with, because that gives you the biggest bang for the buck. And then once you identify them and you can start targeting them and starting a discussion with them, you can see what they're doing. They may be using a system that can do it already. There may be things you can do in terms of connecting them with the right people to do it. And then there's others where they're prepared to make that implementation. And then you would work with them, and you would typically entice them with something where it's, in terms of, I've seen faster turnaround time, get ahead of the queue, seen better rates, for example, because there's less processing work, they could pass the savings on. So, that's for you to decide what's best to engage with your customer to incentivize them to do it, if they even need an incentive other than they see the value in it. But that's the general strategy, is look close to home first and see what your customer base is doing, talk with them, and then identify who you want to do business with, and you can use this as a differentiator.
Good. Appreciate the response.
Are there any other questions? Going once? Well, from for our volunteer team, thank you so much for coming and helping answer these questions. PromoStandards wouldn't exist if it weren't for our volunteer force. So thank you so much. Do any of you have anything else you'd like to add, or until we meet again?
No, thank you everybody for this opportunity. I personally love having these type of conversations with newer members, existing members. So happy to help in any way we can. And Jessica, yeah, I can I think I mentioned the best practices website, and I think this is going to be recorded and shared. So I just
Yes.
want to make sure the folks on the call have access to that website.
Yes, it's going to be placed on our YouTube channel as soon as it's available and set. It sometimes takes 24 to 48 hours, but it will be on before the end of the week.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all of your help. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.